Thank you, Peter, and I'd like to thank everybody involved in education in the ASBMB, all the staff, all the committee members, all the faculty around the country that are devoted to educating biochemists at all levels, and all of you folks for showing up. So it's really an honor also to be here and recognized in the same symposium as future leaders of science. We're really proud of all the poster presenters and the poster winners, and all of the co-workers in the laboratories and the advisors that got those students to do such a great job here at the annual meeting. So I want to first posit to you that the thing that we call the U.S. PreMedical Pipeline is actually much more like a very inefficient refinery or a filter that spews out a lot of the so-called intellectual inputs in it. And so think of the following data. So there was about 300 million U.S. citizens. 1% of us are college or university freshmen, freshwomen every year. 3 million students enter 2- and 4-year college institutions every year. Of those 3 million, 500,000 begin taking chemistry classes, mostly general chemistry. There's a few schools where they begin organic first, and there's a lot of students that take something that's more like a high school or consolidation type chemistry course as first-year students. The vast majority of these students are entering the chemistry curriculum because they've told someone or they've told themselves that they want to be in the health professions. Most of them are actually pre-meds. However, there are only a third of those students that survive to take organic chemistry, again with the general Gen Chem first, organic second sequence that is the classical norm in the American pre-medical academy, let's call it. So there's 3 million freshmen. 1 out of 6 of them begin the sequence of taking chemistry courses as a pre-med. A third of those survive to take orgo. And then we produce, in 2008 numbers, 42,000 medical school applicants. That's risen some in recent years, for 18 or 19,000 seats in 4-year medical schools in the United States. And that may include some seats in Caribbean and Canadian medical seats as well. So about 2 out of 5 of the medical school applicants or so actually get into medical school, and 4 years later, virtually all of those students are our new doctors. Again, these numbers have risen. We're producing almost 20,000 new doctors per year, and there are some national education data that will support these numbers. But the key is that of the 500,000 students that think they want to go into medicine, 96% of them end up doing something else. And this is really why molecular curricular reform is so important. It's not only for the 20,000 docs that we're producing every year that are going to be practicing medicine in the age of the genome and the age of metabolic diseases being rampant, but in addition, for those 480,000 students that begin thinking that they might want to do medicine and end up doing something else. So that's why this is such a key thing. And of course, our colleges and universities are organized to support these 500,000 students. And so you all know about, if you are undergraduate educators or if you are undergraduates, the large classrooms in which you take introductory biology classes, introductory chemistry classes, and the tremendous amount of human resources that go into staffing these classes and selecting what we're teaching these large numbers of students. And so we really have to ask ourselves, what do these students want? What do these students need? and how do we develop the coursework and optimally deliver the knowledge that I would call molecular literacy, not only for future physicians, but for these 500,000 students per year. And so I don't think that I would have necessarily gotten the traction or the interest in these ideas were it not for the urgency of the MCAT being redeveloped. So the medical college admission test was last revised in 1991. We got word in around 2011, 2012 that there's going to be a new MCAT. And some people pointed out that it's not even required for all medical college admissions. So, for example, Mount Sinai's got a very prestigious program, HUMED. They have another one called FlexMed that does not require the MCAT. But when you think of the average medical school applicant, or the medical school applicant applies on average to 14 different medical schools, this is a de facto common denominator, because students, they all have different professors, they took different courses. So to ground each and every medical school applicant around the country with a number or a set of numbers is highly useful for medical school admissions. And increasingly, it's similar to the admissions examinations called PCAT for pharmacy school and DAT for dental school, in which there's metabolism in the biology portion of the PCAT. There's macromolecules in the chemistry portion of PCAT. They may not call it biochemistry, but it is in fact the core knowledge that is taught in a 1 or 2 semester biochemistry course. And I want to remind you all, in case you didn't know, that until the last couple of years, because MCAT didn't cover, amazingly, MCAT didn't cover biochemistry, biochemistry was not traditionally a required course for pre-medical students, yet the pre-medical students always take the 2 semesters of biology, essentially 5 semesters of chemistry, a couple of semesters of collegiate physics, some math, and so forth. And so, so this diagram, which was put out by AAMC, actually details the way in which the 1991 and the 2015 MCATs are the same or different. The key is that about 75% of natural science is the same material that it was over the last 2-3 decades. But now there is some biochemistry. In addition, there's use of research methods that's incorporated in the natural sciences as well as elsewhere. And there's new section on behavioral and social sciences. There's critical analysis and reasoning skills that go from social sciences and so forth. And there's no longer a writing test. So again, let's think about not only doctors practicing in the latter half of this decade and in this new millennium, but also biomedical researchers and how we're in a different world than we were in 1991. And so let me just give you a few things to think about in terms of genomics and metabolism, which have really exploded since 1991. So one is a very common scenario that we hear about all too often, that 2 patients said to have the same malignancy are given the same chemotherapy as the standard of care. One of these patients responds, the other patient doesn't respond. How do we explain that? I think everyone in this room knows that they don't actually have the same disease. The pathologist looked under a microscope and said, this is a squamous cell adenocarcinoma. If they were the same disease, they would respond to the same chemotherapy or radiotherapy the same way. Those 2 tumors actually have different dysregulated pathways. They have different wiring diagrams, different cell biological mechanisms that led to the malignancy, and so you can't actually expect that they would respond to the same treatment the same way. We understand that now, and that's an incredibly important part of biomedical research and medical practice. Next question, what's that compound? Anybody know? So that's Coumadin, or warfarin as they call it in Madison, Wisconsin. So this is a vitamin K epoxide reductase inhibitor that is used as a anti-clotting factor. Now, if you take too much of this compound, then you're going to bleed to death. Take too little of this compound, and you're going to clot to death. And so we now know that sensitivity to this compound is controlled in part by the VCORC1 genotype as well as a couple of other genes. And so now, using that knowledge, it's possible to use a patient's genotype in order to figure out, to a first approximation, how much of this compound, Coumadin, should be given. So again, this is part of standard medical treatment. Now, and I'll give you one last bit of science. Anybody know what you're looking at now? If you were in room 6F this morning, you know that you're looking at a fatty liver. So macrovesicular steatosis in non-alcoholic fatty liver. And again, if you were in the NAFLD symposium this morning, you know that 1 billion people on this earth have this condition, and this is a pre-diabetic condition as well as a precursor to liver cirrhosis and hepatocellular carcinoma. And just like I would say this is like a biomedical equivalent of the Western Antarctic ice shelf. So the rate and the extent to which the Western Antarctic ice shelf crumbles into the ocean is going to have massive effects on flooding around the globe and macroeconomic forces and population forces that future generations are going to have to deal with. The degree and extent to which the 1 billion people with fatty livers like these progress to type 2 diabetes is going to have huge impacts on global productivity, economics, how many docs we're going to need to take care of how many sick people. And so I don't think I need to convince people in ASBMB that we do need an integrated knowledge of genetics and metabolism in order to do the research and to do the medicine to prevent this global epidemic and tidal wave. So let's think about what we knew about mutation detection in 1991. Again, the year the last MCAT was introduced. And so mutation analysis in 1991 turns out that you could basically genotype 4 genes back then: HGPRT, glycophorin A, HLA, as well as hemoglobin. But that's only if you were a very expert molecular biologist, biochemist, and you had a laboratory with very precision tools and high skills. Today, mutation detection, variant detection, basically you can get 1.2 million SNPs analyzed if you have $199, because essentially you send that money to 23andMe, they send you a kit, you get back information on 50 monogenic diseases, 250 diseases and conditions, your ancestry and so forth, drug sensitivity and efficacy. And increasingly, patients are taking their SNP data to their physicians and expecting their physicians to provide them with personalized precision medicine. And docs that were trained decades ago essentially don't know how to do this. And they're not going to know how to do this unless we prepare them to do this. And those of us in the research community are not going to be able to support the docs to do this unless the undergraduates are given a sensible curriculum. So now there have been some counter arguments to Zoiben, and essentially Peter and others in the ASBMB community have been telling people for years that there should be more biochemistry for undergraduates, there should be more biochemistry for medical students. But we encounter some resistance. And so, for example, it's a fact that Coumadin sensitivity is still more sensitively determined ex vivo by something where you take a drop of blood and you look at the rate at which prothrombin clots, and that still is more accurate than SNP genotyping technology. In addition, we're always told, oh, you know, undergraduates and medical students are going to forget the things that you taught them, but it's okay because there's going to be an app for that. You know, there's going to be an app for someone's genotype. There's going to be an app for metabolism. And that's somewhat true. We're told that most docs don't practice in academic medical centers. This is really a terrible argument for teaching less biochemistry because, in fact, if you're a doc practicing in a community hospital and you can't go and talk to a professor in the biochemistry department, you actually have to know much more metabolism and you have to be much more independently knowledgeable about molecular medicine than someone who's practicing in an academic medical center who can knock on my door if they want to talk about the urea cycle or something like that. And finally, we're told all the time that there are new experimental models as well as Canadian medical centers that are operational that can produce a doc in 3 years of medical school, producing a cost savings. And so there's a need, they tell us, to compress and eliminate basic science information in medical education and leave that somehow to some non-named specialist. But in this climate of end of 2012, when we knew the new MCAT was coming, and we knew that from the undergraduate point of view, colleges and universities were not prepared necessarily to do pre-health advising and to organize the coursework that students were going to need if the MCAT were to, and of course it does, test biochemistry. Dagmar Ringe and I sat down and made a 4-part set of recommendations. And those recommendations are the following. That first, in that year of biology that is mandated, we've got to make sure that the central dogma is taught there in some level of detail. So that biology, you know, can't be. There was a time at the University of Iowa when it was literally called botany and zoology, and it's not clear how much molecular science was in that course. So today, pretty much every biology course around the country does get into molecular genetics and biological information transfer, and that's absolutely essential. Secondly, and I'm going to come back to this later, although pre-meds take a lab course, they are essentially mandated to take organic chemistry laboratory. The lab courses have to emphasize research methods and data analysis. So in fact, organohalide synthesis is not the most relevant laboratory method for pre-medicine or medicine. Research methods could be anything from monitoring human performance, could be quantifying GFP, fluorescence in cells, could be a biochemistry, molecular biology lab. But whatever that laboratory course is, it's got to include data analysis. So students have to look at what actual data look like and see spreads of data and calculate means and standard deviations and be able to calculate whether two sets of values are statistically significantly different from each other. Third, and most controversially, we pointed out that we think that chemistry should focus on the reactivity of biological functional groups much more than non-substituted alkanes, alkenes, alkynes, and organohalide synthesis. And then finally, we recommended that biochemistry be required for all pre-health students. And we recommended more in-depth courses, but we understand that not all schools are going to be able to provide them and that everybody needs to be taking at least a one-semester survey. So the initial recommendations were made public in A Today, and then I've subsequently sort of refined these in biochemistry and molecular biology education, BAMBED, as well as in an article in the Journal of Chemistry Education. So the undergraduate biochemistry recommendation, initially was considered a resource issue, especially in small colleges. So it's going to be the most biologically oriented chemist and the most chemically oriented biologist in a small college that's going to have to teach this. And these these departments, in particular chemistry, has a lot of service teaching, and if they're keeping their major track and have to add a biochemistry course, it is clearly a resource issue. Secondly, a lot of biochemistry books are designed to be, taught over an entire year. And however, there are some short courses that are coming out. Tomoko, Berg, and Stryer is one of them, that it was really designed to be covered in one semester and by biologists. Chemists might use a more mechanistically oriented text like Leninger, and what I would suggest they do is really rely on the biology department to teach, gene expression, and to focus on the key stuff that we would depend on a biochemistry course to cover, namely macromolecular structure, enzyme function, and central metabolism. And so striking the right balance in a brand new biochemistry course between the biology and the chemistry is really crucial. And I'll just tell you how I did it. I currently teach in a 2-semester biochemistry course for majors, but I did a few lectures when we revised our biochemistry course for non-majors. That's our 1-semester course, and I basically did the first 4 lectures. So this was my first slide. So I assumed that most of the students are coming over from the chemistry department, where they're used to a periodic table, laws of thermodynamics, and a lot of regularity. And so my first job was to try to explain to this group of people that there are some rules in biochemistry, although there is all of the variation that you see in biology. And so the 2 rules are, number 1, physics and chemistry are never violated. And rule 2, things are the way they are because of mutation and selection. So there's a genetic encoding, of the way things work, and the way things work does not violate any chemical, physical principles. And that turned out to be a very useful way to sort of organize my thinking and attempt to organize the thinking of the students that went on. The next thing that I think I taught them was probably water and the hydrophobic effect and 20 amino acids and all that good stuff. So in terms of pre-health advising now around the country, adding a 1-semester biochemistry course is no longer controversial. In addition, biochemistry is frankly available online for credit and non-credit. Your students can take biochemistry by extension from the University of Iowa offering if they absolutely need to. I'm sure that they don't need to at any of your schools because you're all ASBMB members. Now, interestingly enough, psychology and sociology faculty at some schools are sort of battling for required status. That is, there's some social science that's on the new MCAT, and so some social science faculty have said, well, you know what, you should really be, telling the pre-health students that they really must take some psych and social. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they basically want to get more TA lines, because they think that if they have higher enrollment in their classes, that they're going to need more support, and they're going to get more support from their dean. And I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. And then there are challenges for chemistry departments, because several of the largest enrollment classes on campus have multiple constituencies, including chemistry majors, these pre-health students, as well as other students like chemical engineering students that need some general chem as well. So obviously careless differentiation of the pre-health students and the chemistry majors would degrade student options, and nobody really wants that. So the resource issues, let's follow this through. I am a department chair, and so let's think this through as a chair or as a dean, as well as a person thinking about resource allocation. in terms of undergraduate education. So if biochem or sociology become required pre-med courses, the teaching effort clearly and the TA effort clearly increases. However, the workforce demands for sociologists or biochemistry PhDs doesn't increase just because we have to do more service teaching. We're doing service teaching because now the MCAT requires these classes, and more students are taking these classes essentially because they have to, and so it's more effort for us to teach. But Shirley Tilgman and many colleagues have pointed out that we need the workforce that we need. There's a certain demand for biochemistry PhDs, and it's not actually related to the amount of TA slots that we need in order to cover these courses. And so I have advocated that we really de-link the TA ships from our undergraduate teaching loads, in part because time to degree suffers. If I was to essentially make all of our graduate students do more TAing because I have larger enrollment in these classes, I'm going to degrade their research performance and their time to degree. And neither, I think, could I argue for a larger graduate program just because we have more teaching. And so what we do in our department is we think of the TA effort as essentially a departmental finance problem. So I need to find enough faculty that are willing to let their students do more units of TAing and find more students that are willing to do more TAing effort than one TAing one time in their graduate career. And then I need to compensate the advisor, I need to compensate the PI for that lost effort. So if in our department we calculate that it's about a third of the graduate student's effort in the 4 months in which he or she is functioning as a TA, and so I essentially owe that principal investigator a third of an effort for a third of a year or a ninth of an annual graduate package in order to make it possible for graduate students to provide more TA effort. That's essentially the way we do it. And so departments essentially will, in fact, teach more. Biochemistry departments are teaching more because more pre-health students are taking biochemistry. In fact, there is more faculty effort available for teaching right now because our research funding is so terrible. So let's get back to science rather than finance. So what is life-oriented chemistry? This is a term that Dagmar Ringa and I introduced when we said that chemistry might really need to change. Chemistry might need to be more focused on training a pre-medical student, but very, very importantly, a large percentage of those students are not going to practice medicine. We're hoping actually they will catch the research bug. And so what kind of chemistry should our colleagues in chemistry department optimally be teaching? Or is it optimal the way they're doing it? The way they're doing it is for the most part, they're giving every incoming student a year of general chem, every student that graduates a year of general chem, a year of organic chemistry, and you know how that is taught. So we advocate functionalized carbon earlier, less organohalide synthesis, less non-substituted carbon. We want to emphasize reactions that are catalyzed by enzymes, i.e. hydrolysis of esters and amides, aldol and Claisen condensations, conjugate additions, the kinds of reactions that you see in central metabolism and peptide hydrolysis and the like. Now, as I've talked about this with departments around the country, chemistry departments around the country, I've heard many different points of view. And one department said, well, we can add life-oriented chemistry if the dean gives us more resources, because essentially it sounds like you want 3 new semesters of general and organic chemistry that is more oriented towards this biomedically oriented student. Well, we still have our chemistry major program, and we're not going to give up our classical Gen Chem and OChem, and so we need more, we need more resources in order to develop those programs. Never mind the fact that they have sections for majors and non-majors, and they could, in fact, free up effort for their non-majors, who are almost all pre-medical students, in order to develop this 3-semester curriculum. And so the opposite point of view was taken by a leader at a very large research university who said that, they're stretched to deliver 5 semesters for their non-majors. So if they could come up with a 3-semester sequence, that would be resource conserving. They know they're not going to get any more resources from their dean. They're the biggest department on campus, and they've already maxed out what they're going to get. And Dagmar and I imagined that a 1-to-1 sequencing should be strongly considered, and so that would mean 1 semester of Gen Chem, followed by a revised and reoriented 2-semester sequence of life-oriented organic chemistry, followed by biochemistry for the biomedically oriented students, and then the 2nd semester of Gen Chem, which is more physically oriented, for the chemistry majors. And at the University of Iowa, all of the departments except for chemistry basically said if we could develop this course of life-oriented chemistry, they would love to have a student that was trained in, that knows, in fact, that the aldol condensation is a much more important reaction to remember in biology than a Grignard reaction, for example. This is, anybody that teaches metabolism knows that the blank stares when we say aldolase does an aldol condensation in reverse. It's just the name of a reaction to the people that got out of organic chemistry the way it's typically taught. But we think that organic chemistry for life-oriented students could be taught in a way that would really connect with biochemistry. And so we think this would be superb for people that go into research as well as medicine, as well as general molecular literacy. So now it turns out that Dagmar and I were not voices crying out in the wilderness, and now 4 chemists, Charkoudian, Sampson, Kumar, and Kritzer, have an article coming up in Nature Chemical Biology, and as well as this website in which they're documenting at least 14 schools in the United States that are in fact revising their chemistry curricula, in part in response to our recommendations. And 2 of them did it more or less the way Dagmar and I thought that they would. So Purdue University and University of Richmond have this 1-to-1 sequence in which after 2 semesters of an organic chemistry course that is in part being revised, the students are ready for biochemistry. So they're ready for biochem as 2nd semester sophomores. Now, some colleges and universities, including Ripon College and the University of Michigan, as well as campuses of the University of Minnesota and campus of the University of Wisconsin, have pointed out to us that they've always done OChem first. In addition, Tufts has which is where Josh Kritzer has an innovative program that has 2 semesters of Gen Chem, and then they have a year that is a sort of combined organic chemistry, biochemistry curriculum. And there's others that are being developed nationally. Now, my own disclosure is that I've started talking with Brent Iverson and Eric Anslin, who are 2 of the very active authors of Brown Organic Chemistry. They're both faculty members of University of Texas at Austin. And so this book is Cengage, and what we would do is sort of restructure this book, throwing out a lot of the organohalide synthesis, and we would put in some new content that would try to provide a unified chemical and biochemical pedagogical approach to teaching biomolecule reactivity, with an emphasis, And just to illustrate that in one little diagram, you'll notice that this is a peptide substrate of chymotrypsin. And the way this is really going to be a chemistry book, not a biochemistry book. So we're never going to explain that chymotrypsin weighs 25,000 Daltons, but we're going to show that the scissile bond, the key carbonyl carbon, is attacked by oxygen only. Not because serine has some magical way of becoming an alkoxide ion, but because this serine is next to the imidazole group and the aspartate side chain that give it this charge relay that allow it to have this electronic structure at the key carbon, which is obviously stabilized by an oxyanion intermediate. And so we want to teach the organic chemistry of biochemical reactivity. So the last couple of slides, I'll just tell you a few things that are going on with medical curricula around the country. And as you may know, the typical medical curriculum used to be 2 years of basic science, 2 years of preclinical training, followed by 2 years of clinical rotations. Now, this is being accelerated to 2 or 3 semesters of basic science followed by clinical experiences. And there are essentially departments of medical education or offices of medical education rather than basic science departments that are teaching the medical students. And so, in addition, we have colleagues in medical schools that say, gee, you're testing biochemistry in the MCAT, so our students had biochemistry already as pre-medical students. Isn't that now a medical school subject that maybe it doesn't need to be taught in the medical curriculum at all again? And so those of us around the country have fought this battle. We've retained some fundamental biochemical concepts in an integrated first year, generally first semester basic science course. And we try to revisit biochemical concepts when the students are already doing clinical rotations. The problem is that once the students start doing procedures, it's a little late to try to learn or refresh even biochemical principles. So it's really kind of a logistical and pedagogical problem. And effectively, biochemistry curricula have been shrunken so for example, here in La Jolla, there used to be 80 hours taught by, in fact, Susan Taylor and Ed Dennis, 2 really expert biochemists. That's been cut down to 12 hours. At University of Michigan, there's no longer a biochemistry course. Instead, it used to be a semester course. Now there's a month on cells and tissues. Inside of cells and tissues, there's a little bit of biochemistry still in there. And so this is a problem that Peter and Dan Rabin and others and I have agitated about in order to try to defend the amount of biochemistry taught to medical students in medical schools. And in fact, this is precisely contrary to the AAMC HHMI report that led to the development of the new MCAT. So Alpern, Belitsky, and Long essentially said we need to make sure that all incoming medical students have biochemistry so that we can teach a higher level of biomedical sciences, and we want to emphasize physical sciences and their relationship to medicine in medical school, and in fact the opposite has occurred. So that's a bit of a problem. As Peter pointed out, we actually have a counterexample, not in a medical school course, but in a dental school course at the University of Iowa. And here's how it came about. So the course is called Bioch 8101, and it's for the D1s, the first year dental students. It's taught by us, the faculty of the Department of Biochemistry. Obviously, the dental college does not have its own biochemistry department. It was driven by discussions between our department and that college, and it occurred because essentially all of the University of Iowa first-year dental students had taken biochemistry in college, and a very large number of them had taken biochemistry in college from us, from our department. In fact, a large number of them had taken biochemistry from the same faculty member that was teaching the undergraduate survey course, who was teaching the first semester biochemistry course for D1 students. So we realized that this was an opportunity. They thought, well, should the students test out? Should they just drop the course? Or potentially, should we develop higher level material? And once we asked them whether there was any part of their four-year curriculum in which the students were exposed to problems of metabolism or genomics, and they told us no, they told us that they really wanted us to teach a higher level course. So I'm happy to provide anyone with the syllabus, and it's basically a class that has 15 different topics with discussions every Friday, and we really start with the genome and the central dogma, sort of DNA, RNA, and protein in the first 3 weeks that the students really get very excited about. And we cover things that are near and dear not only to biochemists' hearts, but that relate by carbohydrate metabolism and lipid metabolism that relate to diabetes and obesity. And in fact, we have specifically a week on obesity and diabetes, which is something that people that work on the mouth need to communicate to their patients about. We also have a week on biochemistry of taste and pain, the microbiome, infection, inflammation. It's really, really quite a good course. So I think I'm going to sum up here. If there's time, I'll do questions. If not, I'm available. I think that the points that I've tried to make for you are that our academy has been organized in a way that tried to shoehorn 500,000 students a year into the first 2 years of a chemistry curriculum that burdens many faculty and burdens our institutions with a great deal of effort and was not really optimized towards this group of students. Not only for those that are going into medical school ultimately, but those that are going to do anything else. And no matter the career path, all of these students really need to understand the molecular basis of life, which is foundationally chemistry, but what kind of chemistry ought it to be? So biology, very consistently with the ASBMB recommendations, is teaching basic genetics. Some chemistry departments are changing, and essentially almost all schools are offering biochemistry. One of the most important of those four recommendations is that research methods have to be part of the core pre-medical curriculum and data analysis. And I'm not sure that most undergraduate institutions are really emphasizing the importance of data analysis in the biomedical curriculum for our own students going into research as well as students going into medicine. And finally, I still think that there is a need for life-oriented chemistry textbook and other teaching materials. And again, thank you for your attention. I'm really honored by this award and the opportunity to talk to you about these ideas, and I'd be very happy to take your questions if there's time. Thank you.